Hello. In this presentation, we're going to talk about active, student-centered, remote learning, and the way forward. This talk was given on September 3rd at the leading global socioeconomic forum that was hosted from Dubai, UAE. The words that we are going to focus on are active learning, student-centered, learning experience, and technology. Well, I have some news for you. Remote or distance learning is not new. In fact, many years ago, it was called correspondence course. In a correspondence course, you receive your lessons by mail. The mail arrives at your home, or you collect it from the post office, depending on where you live in. And with the course, you get your materials like booklets to read. If you're studying a language, you might get a long play record, a vinyl, with the audio. And of course, your learning assignments. Your learning assignments will involve reading, listening, looking at things, working on things, writing what you're supposed to write, and then you mail it back to the course instructor. Now, as we started to improve in technology, as you can notice in the picture, the vinyl gave way to DVDs and CD-ROMs and so forth. But you still had to wait for it to come in the mail. A lot of people who lived far away from schools or had a busy life or a job took these correspondence courses to improve themselves and to get a better job. Where does technology fit in distance learning or remote learning? Well, the first thing we need technology for is storage. How do you store something that you're going to hear? Over 100 years ago, if you wanted to hear anything at all, like somebody speaking or music being played, you had to be there. And then technology stepped in. After the vinyl record, we got the cassette tape. And in the correspondence course, as I said, you get printed booklets. And in fact, if you were studying electronics or electricity or radio and television, they actually sent you a kit to build by yourself. So if you're studying radio and television, you actually got to build a television. However, today, the technology has reached very 21st century levels, and we no longer need to physically transport. So let's take, for example, something that you need to put together like a kit could possibly become a hologram in the future, where you would take something made out of thin air and put it together, whether you're studying medicine or whether you're studying engineering. So the future could be that you don't have to have physical materials, and you can do that by hologram. And of course, the ones that have been around for a while are like the PDF, the PowerPoint, the media files, and the streaming. All of these are storage systems that bring the information to you via a digital communication system called the internet or any digital format. Another need for technology is the communication part. In remote learning or in physical face-to-face learning, there is communication. So again, let's go back to the past where communication If you wanted to speak to your instructor, you probably had to call them on the phone, and, excuse me, and that could be very expensive because long distance phone calls were really expensive in the past. Or you can write them a letter and wait for them to answer you. So the disadvantages of the old technology was that it took a long time to reach you. However, today we have hundreds, if not thousands, of apps that we can use for instant communication. And those apps not only transmit print or voice, but they can also transmit images and videos. Another reason we use technology in learning is for the interaction. Now, in the physical presence classroom, you can ask people to work with each other, to talk to each other. In the past, that was very difficult because to have an interaction between two or more in a group, they had to send each other letters or call each other on the phone. And this was the difficult part, it's not the most interesting part of the learning process is when two people are talking to each other or giving each other information that the other has to deal with. However, today it has become easier with the technology that we have. So, for example, there are a lot of technology platforms out there that can have breakout rooms, talking to each other, and like you can see right here, people can see each other, talk to each other. You can have breakout rooms. This is the fantastic world that we are living in. However, we need to improve the learning system. Before we can move forward, whether with face-to-face or technology-enhanced learning, we need to understand that without a learning experience, learning is not happening. Let's look at some things. To learn, we cannot learn in a vacuum. So there must be a source of information for us to start having a learning experience. And that source of information is information that we can hear, information that we can read, information that we can see, information that we can feel, like heat, pressure, roughness, smoothness, gravity. And of course, our minds are not blanks, so we also have information in the memory. But what is a learning experience? Before we can talk about it, we need to understand that as technology improves, the technology is in how we store and transmit the information. At the moment, it's still difficult to transmit a feel information. So for example, I cannot send over a digital two-way communication, whether for somebody to feel a surface and see that surface is smooth or rough. We cannot transmit the heat or the coldness over the digital space. But here is something that people still believe in. Some people still believe that they should absorb and retain information from the source. This is not a learning experience. If you memorize what you hear, or you memorize what you read, or you memorize what you see or feel, that is not a learning experience. Yes, you have memory of things. And in the past, many centuries ago, there used to be people who were called the messengers. These people would run from one town to another, from one village to another. They would listen to the message given from the chief, for example. They would commit it to memory, and then run to the next village and tell it to the other chief verbatim, word for word. But they themselves did not understand the message. They only memorized it and transmitted it. So that is not a learning experience. So what makes an experience a learning experience? Let's look at the source of information again. Source of information that we can hear a speech, we can hear a radio broadcast, we can hear a piece of music. All of these are sources of information that we can hear. We can read the pages of a website. We can read the words on a page in a book. We can read the words or the figures or the tables of the ingredients on a package of food. So all of these are sources of information. But in order for it to become a learning experience, this information must be processed by our brains. Now, there are many of those processing systems. However, the one that we are born with and we know from a very young age is to compare and contrast the information, to find a cause and an effect for the information, to classify and categorize the information, to sequence the information, to establish the pattern for information. So in order for the information to become a learning experience, we need to process that information, and that processing can only happen in our brains. Therefore, let's conclude again. Memorizing the information is not a learning experience. Processing the learning experience is a learning experience. Now, let's look at remote learning and processing information. If you are reading alone and your mind is actively processing what you are reading, then you are getting a learning experience. However, just because you are reading does not mean that you are getting a learning experience. And I don't know how many of you have had the experience. I was a voracious reader when I was a teenager, or even in my early teens. But there were many times that I would go through 2, 3, 4 pages. My eyes are still reading, and I'm turning the pages, and then I stop. Oh my God! I wasn't reading anything. My mind was on something else completely. So it is possible, and I don't know how many of you have had that experience, it is possible to continue reading with your eyes, whereas your mind is somewhere else. And that happened to me, and I'm sure it happened to a lot of you. So when is it a learning experience? When your mind is processing this information. How do we process? You might be comparing and contrasting characters in the story you're reading, or you might be comparing and contrasting situations in the story with things that you have heard of or even in your real life. This is processing, and this is a learning experience. So let's go back to what is our role as teachers. Our role is to create active learning experiences for our students, not to teach, because teach, unfortunately, has come to mean explain it to the students, tell the students, give the students information that they do not have. But active learning is different. Let's look at it. When you talk, when you write, when you do something, and when you draw or produce an image, as a result of the processing of information, that is active learning. So let's look at it again. Here is the information on the right. If your mind is processing this information that you're hearing by looking for a pattern or by comparing and contrasting some of the information, and you talk to somebody else about it, or write about it, or do something as a result, or draw an image or a graph or a table or a chart, As a result of the processing, then you would be doing active learning. It is not active if you only do it in your mind. So let's go back to the gentleman who was reading alone. If you are reading alone and you start to make notes in the margins of your book, that means that what you are reading, you are processing. You're saying, this is important information. This is information that is opposite to information. And you write a note, you annotate the passage in the book. Then you're doing active learning. When you talk about it, you argue about it, you discuss, and discuss does not mean talk. You see it a lot in the books. Discuss. No. Discuss means look at something from two different perspectives until you find that perspective that both sides can agree on. That is a very short, of course, definition, and we will leave a more detailed discussion for a video in the future. So one more time, what is active learning? When there is a source of information, and you have got plenty of those, you've got the books, you've got the passages, you've got the audio, you've got the videos, and in science, you've got the feelings, the temperature, etc. When, as a result of processing this information, the student talks or writes or does something or draws something, or even a combination, then we can call it active. What should happen in the classroom and in remote learning? They are very similar. The difference is that in the remote classroom, you are communicating via technology. But that is also possible today in the classroom. I mean, you can have a tablet and be typing out information for some of the students who already have tablets and working on something else. Therefore, what is education? Education does not mean the teacher prepares everything to explain and tell to the student, and then when there is something different, the teacher has to do it all over again. And I will give an example of, vocabulary, especially vocabulary in an American reading program. The teacher spends hours at home getting pictures, definitions, preparing models and actions that the students will do so that they can understand a word. It might take the teacher 2 to 3 hours to prepare that vocabulary lesson, especially when that teacher knows that he or she is going to be observed by a supervisor or a coordinator. But once the teacher does the explaining of those words, whatever means, and they are good means, I'm not saying they're not good. When we get to new words, the teacher has to do it all over again. However, if we design a processing system, and therefore, after some time with the teacher assisted, the students are able to learn the new words in the new unit by themselves without a teacher having to explain each word or prepare, then we have an education system. And this is not fantasy. It is not fiction. It is actually something we have done. I've had teachers, after 2 to 3 months, can walk into the second grade and the third grade. And those teachers, you know yourselves, you're out there if you're listening to this. The teacher walks in and says to the kids, well, you know how to learn these words now? Start. What has happened? The students have become autonomous, independent learner. And this is called education. So let's look at from teacher assisted. You, the teacher, designs the tasks. Remember, for it to be active learning, it has to result in talk, write, draw, take action, etc. that makes the student's mind process the information in a certain way, such as compare and contrast, cause and effect, sequence, etc. And we can rely on Vygotsky zone of proximal development here is we know that the student can do up to this point alone. And we bring in that extra task that helps them move to the next level. If the students start to learn not what is the answer, but how I can process information to create an answer, the student can now process new information in a similar way without needing a teacher to tell them how or if they're doing right. They are now becoming self-learners. This has got to be the future. If we cannot design the learning to create self-learners, it's a complete waste of time. Let's look at student-centered now. So we went from learning experience to active learning, and now what is student-centered? I am giving this information based on sitting in the classroom for over 300 sessions, writing down every 5 minutes what I see and hear in a classroom of different genders, different teachers. And what I have found is that not many students are getting lots of learning experience time in a traditional classroom setting. And this is sometimes being done now through the digital means, the online means, where the teacher talks at the students. Let's see what happens. In 50 minutes of a classroom, or 45 or 60, whatever you want to call it, this student, you know, we have 25 to 30 students, 2, 3, or 4 students are getting more learning experience time, and the reason is very simple. They are able to answer the teacher. They know what's going on, and they can write a correct answer. Their hands go up first. So the more they give answers and answer the teacher and talk and write, the more learning experience they get. Remember, the active learning has got to be in result of you design a task where the students talk in order to process information. And when I observe that, I notice that the majority of the rest of the students are doing very little. And I want to tell you that when you give a worksheet that the students look at as a test, not as a learning, there is a difference between a sheet that is designed for learning and a sheet that tests learning. So if you say, this is for them to practice, I go, when did they learn it? You can't practice something you haven't learned. Oh, we're going to practice speaking today. Yeah, you only know 10 words. What kind of practice is it going to be? Therefore, this is not student-centered because most of the 25 to 30 students in the classroom are not talking, writing, doing something, or producing an image to process information. It becomes student-centered when we maximize the learning experience time per student. So if a learning session is 50 minutes long, all the participants, I mean, should be getting maximum learning experience time. And let me repeat, active learning is when every student talks, writes, does something, or produces an image. This is what we can physically do. So our classroom will start to look like this. Why? Because we are not equal 100%. No 25 to 30 students will get exactly the same amount of learning experience, but our role as educators is to maximize the learning experience time for every individual. And here comes the biggest problem. How How can we get them all to talk? How can I check everybody's writing? You're thinking as a teacher, and you feel that every time somebody opens his or her mouth, you need to test them to tell them that they are right or wrong. That is not education. Any education that results in a yes or no answer, black and white, fill in the blank with one correct answer, is part of the learning process, but it is not the learning process. So, how do we do that? So, from student centered, we need to remember this. How do we maximize the learning experience time for all the students? Well, here is one thing we need to do. We need to develop our self-management skills, not just for us educators, but for the teachers as well. So when we start to design self-management skills tasks, the students will learn self-management. And again, I know this is not all of you and not all of the schools and not all of the teachers, but if the teacher sometimes wants to make groups, yes, you and you and you sit there, you and you sit there, that is not management. And the noise that results and the people who don't know what to do makes it, oh, we've tried group work, it doesn't work. Well, it's the management that doesn't work. So let's take one example here. This is for Jigsaw. There are red cards from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the number of students. Green cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Blue cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yellow, etc. If we have a list of the names and we know which card is going to be given to which student, and they have that card, we can tell them, sit at the table that has the same color flag as your card and do the task on your desk. So you have a flag that is in red, another table has a flag in green, etc. And you say, look at your card, look at the color of your card. Where you see a flag with that color, go and sit at that table. When you sit at that table, you will see a paper or an envelope or a handout for a task. Remember, what is a task? You need to talk, write, do, or produce an image as a result of processing some information. So now all the students who have the red cards are sitting at this table. All the students who have the green cards are sitting at this table. Now we need to jigsaw. And you tell them after 10 minutes. Now I said 10 minutes. It can be anything. It can be after 2 minutes. It can be after half an hour. It can be when you finish the task. So after 10 minutes, move to the table that has the same number as the number on your card. So in addition to a flag that is red or green or blue or yellow, you also have a number on the flag. So if you have on the flag 1 and on the next table the flag is 2, what are you going to see? All the people with the 1 cards will be sitting at the table that has the 1 on the flag. So notice how they have mixed into 4 colors. So we started homogeneous. All the red colors were sitting together. When they moved after 10 minutes, now each table has red, green, blue, yellow, red, green, blue, yellow. And this way, they bring the experience from one group where all of them were red into a mixed group where each one is a different color. So this person experienced a different table, etc. And the task was tell each other what you did at the color table you were at. Now, will it happen the first time? No. What we need to do is not to use it for helping them learn immediately. We need to use it to learn to self-manage. So we might make fictitious tasks. They don't have to be real because we want to observe the students able to do this. So our focus is not on the result of the task, but rather on the self-management of moving around. You might add things like, you need to move around and you can't drag a chair, you can't make noise more than this whisper. And if they do, you stop them, you say, go back, let's try it again, because your focus is on the management. Now, once they learn the management, you can redesign your tasks to fit into the jigsaw. And this is just one of many things we can do. Can we do jigsaw at any level? The answer is yes. I've done it for 150 teachers at the same time. But instead of them moving to tables, they were moving to different classrooms that had color paper on the doors. So the teachers, the 150 teachers, they had color cards and they were walking the hall. They look at the color of the door, they step in. Once they step in, they look at the paper, what they're supposed to do. They sit at the table, probably that has the number 1 or 2 or whatever. Okay, so we need to become designers of management skills. And that doesn't happen overnight. Remember, student-centered, it means maximum learning experience time per student. It means self-management skills where the students can manage themselves. And for student-centered to become better, we need to create that interaction between pairs and groups. Now, interaction can be spoken, interaction can be written, and interaction can be do. You can be building a model, or it can be drawing where you complete each other's drawings as a result of processing information. That is important. Now, can interaction work at any level or grade? Yes. Let's look at something that we have already done with beginning English for young children. They learn to do this as part of their lesson. This girl is saying to this girl, I will show you 2-word cards. Say the 2 words. And this one goes, okay. So this girl now puts the 2-word cards, the and the mall, and this girl is going to read them aloud, the mall. And this girl is going to say, correct. Your turn. And now this girl is going to say, I will show you 2-word cards. So the girls have word cards that they're going to mix so that the other will read them. Which is better? For the teacher to bring 1 student at a time to the board, which takes up a lot of time, and each students get like 30 seconds of reading, but like a minute to walk up to the board or to the smart board and then walk back to their seats. And if you have 25, that's 25 minutes, and each one got 30 seconds of reading. But the rest of the time, don't say they were listening. Listening is not a learning experience. An experience, an active learning experience, you got to do something with the information that you processed. Now, does this take management? Yes, it does. Is it overnight? No. But can it be done in breakout rooms and digital rooms? Yes. Okay. I'm answering myself, I guess. So another thing about student-centered, you remember we said not all the students will ever be equal. Therefore, the tasks have got to be stepped. For example, if we want the students to classify information, can everybody just start by classifying? Impossible. Some people will not know where to start. So what we need to do is to break the classify into steps and tasks. So when I say into steps, I mean break the classify into smaller processing units. Example, the brain needs to compare and contrast what it is that needs to be classified first. If you cannot classify without comparing and contrasting that information that needs to be classified, then when you compare and contrast, you need to identify what it is that stands out from the others. Once you find what stands out, which is called identify, the brain needs to match that item that stands out to other groups that are similar. Then we can say you are classifying or categorizing. Let's have a quick example. For example, we have here a task that the students need to read the columns. I'm not going to put the instructions so I can concentrate on the process. What do you tell the students to do with this? You tell them, read the words up and down and keep saying to yourself, which words are same or different? Can you see the active learning and the experience? Say it to yourself. Use your voice. What is similar and what is different in these words? What is similar and what is different these words? What are you doing in your brain when you say what is similar and what is different? What is similar, what is different? Your brain is comparing and contrasting these words. What happens when you compare and contrast these words, which are similar and which are different? You're going to find one that is different, that stands out, like these. So the minute you can find, you say, well, these are similar and this is different from the rest. These are similar and this, you are identifying. Identify does not mean give me its name. Identify means which one stands out from the others. This is the meaning of identify. If everything looks similar, but one is slightly different and you can pick it out, you are identifying. Now, we take the word sister and we say, okay, which other group does it match to? Which other group does it match to? Sister, oh, it matches to this one. And the word chess, which other group does it match to? You got it. So what we're doing is saying, we identified the word that is different, we got to match it to the other group. And when we move it to the other group, we are classifying. It is not the answer that is important. It is what you can do in order to get the answer that is important. So this is called step tasks. And this is just a small example. Another student-centered technique is stop building lists. Lists memorized will be forgotten for sure. However, if we build a concept instead, it will not be forgotten. And this one here about building a concept in a reading program or in a research program is a workshop on its own that takes hours. But let's look at how it works. You put on the wall the big idea question, then you put the essential question of the week. And as the students read, listen, and find other information, they start to write their notes on sticky paper, on post-it notes or index cards, and stick them on the wall. So this is always present. It's going to be present for the whole unit on the wall. But you don't start with everything. You just start with the big idea question and the first essential question, and you move on in clockwork. This is clockwise. Now, when we have all these examples and how do friends depend on one another on these little cards, we now have information that we can use for discussion, we can use for writing, we can even build a poster. This is learning and education, not some student going to the internet and copying what is off the internet and putting it on a piece of cardboard and on the wall and calling it theirs. It's not theirs. They did not construct it. So again, student-centered means build a concept. Now, the final student-centered for this session is please employ visual thinking techniques. I employed it in the word chart, if you remember, how they circled and they drew lines. Let's have an example with something as simple as, words in the blanks. Visual thinking means that the student is now showing how they reach the answer, not what is the answer. So let's take, for example, this one. Good. I think like this. Good is a describing word, an adjective. So it probably needs to be followed by a naming word, a noun. Now, if the kids cannot write this, they can tell each other in pairs. So notice you are processing, which is called thinking, but visually. And that, when the teacher walks around, from their visual thinking, can know where the problem is. Whereas in the traditional is, oh, we had 4 blanks and you got 3 right and 1 wrong, so you've got 3/4. We shouldn't be interested in the answer by itself. We should be interested in how to think in order to get the answer right. So let's look at another one, invisible thinking, the good news. Okay, you think like this. The good news is a noun phrase, it's a naming phrase, adjective, so it is probably going to need to be preceded by an action verb. And can stand is action verb, so it probably needs to be followed by a naming word or a noun. Depends on what you're teaching them, naming words or nouns, whatever. But the most important thing, it's called visual thinking techniques. And this is another workshop that takes hours. What is the way forward? The way forward is don't teach, design learning. When you design learning, let's look at what we need to remember. Make tasks that allow students to process information sources through talking, writing, taking actions, and drawing images. This is a learning experience, and the rest just helps it with the management, the concept building, the visible thinking techniques, and etc. I would like to say thank you very much. These are my contact details. And if you'd like, you can watch my TEDx talk, Here Comes the Learning Designer, which elaborates a little bit more on the learning design. And if you'd like to join Eli's 21st Century Knowledge Community, where I am uploading videos like this and lessons for teachers based on the books that they're using. So thank you very much for being a part of this and for watching. I look forward to working with you soon, and I look forward to uploading more videos.